welcome to the audience in front of us as well as the audience watching at home. Thank you for being part of the Medfield TV State Senate debate here at the Medfield High School Auditorium for the Bristol, Norfolk State Senate seat. Before we continue tonight, I'd like to thank some well-deserving individuals that allowed this event to take place. We have 3 volunteers tonight that helped get this wonderful event going on. That's Cheryl, Dunlea, Keil, and Chretien. We are, of course, in the high school auditorium, and we've been so happy to work with the wonderful staff here, including our audio specialist, Matt Frazier, the wonderful custodial staff here at the high school who has helped us set up the event, and of course the administration for allowing us to use this space. I have an amazing staff here at Medfield TV. We have up top is Rachel Ferrulo, covering the candidates is Eric Giselle, and covering myself and our panelists is Hong Lee Bruno, and our director is Sam Merlin in the booth. Introducing our wonderful people on stage with me tonight, we have our panelists from Hometown Weekly, Amelia Tarallo, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Osler Peterson, and from the Medfield State Hospital Planning Committee, Gil Rogers. And of course, I'd like to thank our 3 candidates tonight for coming along with us. We have our independent candidate in the middle is Joe Shortsleeve, the Democratic, let's give it up for him. The Democratic candidate Paul Feeney, and our Republican candidate Jacob Ventura. I'm your moderator for the evening, Brett Pori. I'm the general manager of Medfield TV, and again, thank you all for being here. The format and the rules of this debate are as follows. We ask the audience to remain silent throughout the debate, and we appreciate your cooperation with that request. Each candidate will receive 3 minutes to speak every time they are prompted, which will be timed by our volunteer, Cheryl Dunlea. The candidate's order has been selected prior to the event tonight and will rotate as the night goes on. Each candidate will have an intro and then follow that with the questions from our panelists. From there, we'll have an intermission, and we'll collect questions from our audience as well as from our live audience watching at home. We please just ask for your questions at home in our comment sections. We'll select it from there. After the audience selections, the candidates will have their closing statements, and that'll be our event for tonight. So we start with our candidate intros, and tonight starts with our Democratic candidate, Paul Feeney. Paul?
Thank you so much, Brett, and to everybody that's hosting this debate. Truly appreciate the opportunity to talk about the issues that are important to us in this district. To all those that are here tonight and those watching at home, my name is Paul Feeney, and I hope to earn your support, your vote, and most importantly, your trust over these coming days. My wife, Laura, who's here tonight, and I live on North Street in Foxborough, where we have lived for the last 13 years. I entered the workforce right after graduating Don Bosco High School in Boston in 1996. And for the last 20 years, I have been a blue-collar worker, working as a central office technician for the telephone company. In 2005, I took a leave of absence from my job to enter public service as the first chief of staff to our state senator, Jim Timilty, whose seat I am running to fill. Jim always prioritized the people of this district above all else. That is exactly what we should expect from our public officials and exactly how I intend to serve. I have spent my life as a blue-collar worker, which I think we need more of in the state senate. I've also been blessed to have some great opportunities along the way. I'm proud of my service as a selectman in Foxborough and as the chairman of that board in a very difficult economic period. Though I wasn't sure that I would ever put my name on a ballot again, I think that most of you here tonight and tune into this forum would agree that these are not normal times. And in light of our political discourse recently, there is just too much at stake for me to stand on the sidelines. Politics at all levels just doesn't work for regular working class people anymore. We need to send a message to Beacon Hill that politics as usual is no longer acceptable. People are facing real issues that call for bold and principled leaders that are from our community, and most importantly, for our community. Yet we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. I'm a Democrat that's running to give working class people a voice again, to return to our roots of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and John F. Kennedy, and to offer a new deal of economic prosperity for the people here in Medfield and throughout the Bristol and Norfolk district. There are clear differences between me and the other 2 candidates at this table. Definitely on substance, but also on style. I am proud to campaign positively and on the issues that have always been, and I've always been open and honest with the voters because that's what we deserve. My 2 opponents on the other side of this table and the other side of this aisle have taken a different approach. They've taken a politics as usual approach. And while that may make sense for them as a political opportunity, it does nothing for us to bring families together in this district. It's been said that people will serve the public as they have campaigned among the public. I believe that the people of Medfield and the Bristol and Norfolk district deserve a senator that is available, that is honest, that doesn't change his or her views based on politics, but that fights for the people of this district above all else. I hope you see that in me, and I hope to earn your vote. I look forward to talking about the issues that are important to us tonight, and I urge you to join us in rejecting politics as usual and getting out to vote for me in the special election on Tuesday, October 17th. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Candidate Feeney. Our next introduction is from our independent candidate, Joe Shortsleeve.
Thank you, and I thank you for allowing me to stand up for my open and my close here. Not to disrupt, it's just that I spent so much time on TV that it's easier for me sometimes. My name is Joe Shortsleeve. I'm the independent candidate for state senate. I'm also the father of three. My three children are here tonight. My daughter also graduated from Medfield High School. I'm a local guy. I went to BC High in Dorchester and Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. And then after college, I made the decision to go into TV news. I spent, 35 years in television news, 30 in Boston. 25 of those years were WBZ TV. For the last 10 or 12 years, I has disagreed with that. 60%, almost 65% in some places in this district are independent. But you know what? They've never had a candidate. This time, they have a choice. They have a candidate. Politics or politicians in the state say, I most resemble Jim Timilty. They say that, Jim was the most conservative Democrat in the Beacon Hill Senate. And they say that I am like him. I'm socially liberal, I'm fiscally conservative. I honestly believe that these two gentlemen behind me, and while I applaud them for stepping up for public service, I do believe that they are both out of step with this district. Paul Feeney is a Bernie Sanders Democrat. He is in favor of a single-payer health care, sanctuary cities, and additional taxes on certain people in our community. I am for universal health care. Sanctuary cities, 80% of the population in this country are against them. There are no sanctuary cities in this district. And I don't believe that we need to start imposing additional taxes on people in our community. Jacob Ventura, he's not only out of step, he's extreme. He's extreme on many of the social issues of today. I'm pro-choice. I know he's not. You should look at his record and see where he stands on the social issues that are important to you. I also question his commitment and his sincerity in moving to Attleboro at the 11th hour as this Senate race was about to get underway. I was thinking about it and I said to myself, okay, these guys, I respect what they want to do, but where should they be state senators? I think that Paul Feeney would be really suited well for Cambridge. And I think that Jacob Ventura, who has a penchant for living out of state, would do very well in Waco, Texas. I have no party. I am beholden only to the people. When I worked on the I-Team at WBZ TV, after we made a decision to do a story, we'd all look at each other and we'd say, okay, let's get started. On Tuesday, October 17th, I'm asking you to vote for Joe Shortsleeve. And I say, let's get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And finally we'll give Joe a second to sit. Our final candidate's intro is from Republican candidate Jacob Ventura.
Thank you. I'm Jacob Ventura, the Republican nominee. I'm glad to be here in Medfield tonight. I want to thank Brett and Gil, Amelia, and Pete, and the folks here at the high school for putting this on. This has been a fun campaign, and we have a week left, and looking forward to a good debate tonight. I'm running for state senate to make state government work better for all of us. My campaign represents a new generation of leadership that values ideas, good government, and a reform agenda that shares the values of working families. Born and raised in Massachusetts, I learned early on the value of hard work from my parents and grandparents. As a proud member of the Wampanoag Aquina tribe, along with Portuguese and Cape Verdean ancestry, I understand the value that diversity contributes to our communities. I'm proud to have been the first college graduate from my family, having graduated down at UMass Dartmouth in finance. Later, I earned my law degree from Washington and Lee University in Virginia and was admitted to the bar, having clerked for a firm here in Massachusetts. After serving as an elected town meeting member and a member of my finance committee, I had the privilege to join the State House with Representative Stephen Howitt, who was the representative in the southernmost portion of this district, and ran his legislative office. Together, we've served the people of this region. As your next state senator, I'll continue his tradition in assisting our towns, residents, businesses, and organizations. My experience in finance, the law, and all three levels of government have prepared me to represent this district on day one. Just as everyone must balance a budget, household or business, so too should state government. And that has been the theme I have heard after hitting about 10,000 doors in this district over the last 3 months. I'm going to run to make sure state government's accountable to you, the taxpayers. At the same time, I'll work to lower taxes and regulations and make sure we support our towns through increased local aid. It's possible to lower taxes and increase local aid, I promise you. Public safety is a cornerstone of my campaign as well. I am opposed to sanctuary cities, that's true. And I am opposed from any municipality in the state from not cooperating with ICE or any federal authorities. I want to give our public safety officers the tools they need to keep our community safe. And finally, it's great to be here in Medfield. When this campaign started, my campaign team had a nice lunch meeting at Noon Hill Grill downtown. This town has been wonderful to me. I want to thank the folks who have voted for me in the Republican primary. We won overwhelmingly. I've knocked in every neighborhood in this town. I've met voters, businesses, and it's been a phenomenal experience and the honor of a lifetime. I look forward to a good debate with these two gentlemen here tonight, and hopefully you'll see the clear differences between the three of us. Thank you.
We now open to our panelist questions. Our first question coming from our media source in the middle is Amelia Tarallo, answered first by candidate Shortsleeve. Amelia, your question.
Hi. So in Medfield, particularly, public schools are very important to us. What is your stance on public education funding?
Well, I think it's critically important. In fact, I'm not a politician. I've been a journalist for 35 years, but as I stepped into this role to run for state senate, there a lot of the questions revolve around taxes and funding, and where do you want to put your money? Where do you want to put your priorities? And I was sitting there one night and I said to myself, there's one issue that very few people can disagree on, and that's public education. If there is anything that is critically important, it's public education. I think that has got to be the number one priority in a lot of ways. And what I've heard as I've traveled the district is that there's discontent. People are not happy with the Chapter 70 funding mechanism for public schools. So, because all the communities have kind of individual personalities and they have individual needs. But everybody's talking about Chapter 70 funding. Attleboro's are very upset about Chapter 70 funding. Seekonk, same thing, they're upset. Chapter 70 funding for schools is supposed to help less affluent communities compete on a level playing field. And right now, a lot of those communities don't think that they're being treated fairly. It's a formula from the 90s. They tweaked it again in like 2006 or 2007. But I think that public education is critically important. We should look at the formula again. We should make it a number one. We should make sure that school funding is the number one priority for anybody who's working on Beacon Hill.
Candidate Ventura, do you need the question?
No, I think Joe and I completely agree on this issue. Chapter 70 is a major issue across the state since it was implemented. A lot of the Boston area, more urban schools are sucking up a lot of the resources, and towns like Medfield are footing the bill. Now, fortunately, here in Medfield, you've got some of the best schools in the nation, top 5% in the sate, You know, the proficiency scores I was reading the other day in math and science and reading are just amazing. But we do need to do a better job at making sure that this town and many others like it are getting their fair share, especially for the amount of taxes that are paid in this town. So I hope that answers your question.
Candidate Feeney, do you need the question repeated?
No, thank you very much, and great question to lead off with, Amelia, because this has to be a priority. It's certainly a priority for me, as both my opponents on the other side said. Chapter 70 funding formula is what drives the local aid to communities when it comes to education funding. Hasn't been touched since I was 15 years old. I certainly didn't understand it as a teenager, and I don't even understand it now as I'm running for state senate. So we have to do a better job in kind of figuring out what that is. Bottom line is, we're not splitting the atom. It's basic math. And, you know, I think Joe had mentioned that it comes down to Chapter 70 is supposed to fund, you know, poorer communities. That's not it. There's a formula. But what we haven't done is to take a real look at the formula to figure out what the actual costs are in communities. There is increasing costs in special education, which is critically important here in Medfield and throughout the district, throughout the Commonwealth. Yet it's not adequately addressed in the Chapter 70 formula as it exists today. Healthcare costs that have risen out of control because our healthcare system is broken is not adequately addressed in each of the communities when we talk about education funding. So we have a lot of work to do with the Chapter 70 funding formula. The good thing is that there was a commission established a couple of years ago that came up with a lot of answers and solutions. Those solutions have been prescribed. There's legislation now that is written to address a lot of those issues that were brought up in that commission report. Currently, we're underfunding our schools in Massachusetts by $1 to $2 billion per year. That's unconscionable. Massachusetts has the #1 schools in the nation, and right here in Medfield, actually, I think consistently a top 10 in the state. I think most recently #9 in the state when looking at different factors. In order to hold that designation, we need to be realistic about the costs of things like special education so that we can adequately fund our school system without having towns like Medfield and the rest of the communities in the Bristol, Norfolk be left holding the bag trying to figure out how they're going to raise taxes or put it on the backs of middle-class people in our communities to pay for our schools. So we have a lot of work to do. I support the legislation currently that would implement a lot of those changes to the Chapter 70 funding formula. I haven't heard my opponents say that they would do that. The answers are there. We just need bold leadership that are going to go and a will to actually do that so that we can adequately fund our schools and start to introduce more curriculum around civics education, arts education, turning STEM to STEAM, financial literacy, so that we can actually set up a student for a lifetime of learning. Thank you.
Our next question is brought to you by the Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Pete Peterson, and answered first by Jacob Ventura. Selectman Peterson, your question.
Thanks very much, Brett. My question comes from what I've observed since being a selectman from 2000, which is that there's sort of a mismatch between the funding that's available and the expenses that we need to cover. I would start by saying that I originally heard Michael Widmer, who was the former director of the conservative business-oriented group, the Mass Taxpayers Foundation, say that their organization believed that there was basically very little waste in state government spending. Then I heard the Mass Municipal Association tell us that the cities and towns have these huge unfunded needs for infrastructure things that are, and a lot of it has to do with where we're not getting enough revenue sharing from the then I realized the legislature's issue is that we citizens don't want to pay more taxes. And so that the legislature gives us what we want, which is a lower tax rate, but they aren't giving us the infrastructure and the spending levels that we really need if we're going to run a really first-class society. And so I think we have this conundrum that our citizens don't want to pay more, but they want a lot of government services. And so that's my question. How do you solve this mismatch between what the citizens want and what the state really should be providing to them in terms of services?
Thank you for your question, Maya. Thank you for your, Maya? Yep. This is one of the main reasons why I decided to get into this race, fiscal management. My background's in finance, and one of the things that I have said from day one on this campaign is that, the notion that Massachusetts has a revenue problem, our fiscal year budget this year was $40.2 billion approximately. I don't think Massachusetts has a revenue problem. It's a spending problem. And I think if we prioritize and make state government more efficient, we then can allocate more funds for local aid. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do for towns like Medfield and the other 8 communities in this district. I will partner with the governor on this. I'm just thinking of the many areas of state budget that could be reformed. Mass health comes to mind. It's 40% of our state budget. A quarter of all Massachusetts citizens are on it. The governor proposed legislation a few months ago that was shot down by the Democrats to reform that. That would have saved us millions of dollars. Money that could have gone back to our local aid allocations, which would have helped with veteran services, seniors, roads, housing, and education. So we need to really sit down. My plan as your next senator is to take a stem to stern review of every line item in the budget. Most legislators, I would venture to guess, don't do that. It was about a 320-page document, the state budget. It took me 6 hours to skim, okay? Yet the legislature in each chamber had approximately 3 hours to vote on it. So tackling the budget process in and of itself is another issue, making it more transparent, making sure that the state budget is available for legislators for at least a day, maybe, or 2, to review before they vote on it, making sure that you, the public, can see the state budget as well, as opposed to the veil of secrecy that's going on Beacon Hill right now, where you have a 6-member conference committee go in and make these deals. So reforming the state budget process, introducing accountability through every single line item in the budget, and I promise you there will be plenty of money left over for our cities and towns, and that's my priority, to make sure local aid funding is increased.
Our next answer comes from Candidate Feeney.
I'm not sure a promise that there'll be plenty of money left over for local aid just because we change the process is something that you can take to the bank. Mr. Chairman, it's a great question, and I felt the pain myself as the chairman of the Board of Selectmen in Foxborough in a once-in-a-100-year economic downturn. I got elected, and I went to the Board of Selectmen with all these great ideas, and we were going to do all sorts of things, and then the economy literally collapsed around us. And we were left in Foxborough with some tough decisions. Now, we had a revenue stream. Everybody knows that we have the stadium in town, and we had a revenue stream that we were able to rely on, but we also were able to get through without any significant layoffs or cuts because of careful forecasting, because we knew that in order to make ends meet, we were going to have to be conservative in our fiscal approach. That's how I served on the Board of Selectmen in Foxborough, and certainly what I think we need more of in the legislature. I agree that there are efficiencies out there to be found. I also think, though, that we don't necessarily have a revenue problem, but we can't be afraid to talk about revenue. There's a ballot initiative this year, the Fair Share Amendment, which would impose an additional tax on folks that can afford it, that are doing well. I know both of my opponents have come out against it, one after he came out for it, but we can pass that initiative, bring in an influx into our cities and towns so that we can address Chapter 90 and transportation infrastructure, so we can address Chapter 70 funding like we were just talking about. Taxes are the dues we pay to live in a civilized society. And when we live in a place like Medfield in the Bristol and Norfolk district, 9 very unique, beautiful communities, a great region of this state. We understand that it costs money to have things. It costs money to have services. You're left trying to balance the budget with an uncertain forecast from the state every year. We have to do a better job of making sure that we bridge that gap, that you're able to forecast as a selectman in this town exactly what the revenue is going to be from year to year and exactly what your mandate's going to be, so that you're not left holding the bag at the last minute, raising taxes on the middle class here in the community, raising real estate taxes just to make ends meet. So we have a lot of work to do. Again, we can't be afraid to talk revenue, not on the backs of the middle class, which I am vehemently against. So many people are one paycheck away from poverty throughout this district. And I want to make sure that we're actually taxing the people that have it, that are doing well, so that we can take care of a community like Medfield and bridge that gap between what you need to spend and what you're actually getting from the state.
Thank you, and our final answer for this question is from Candidate Shortsleeve.
He hasn't even been elected, and he's already raised our taxes. Okay, one of the problems with the budget process here in Massachusetts is that we base our budgets on projected revenues. We don't base our budgets on actual revenues like some states do. That's a problem. I think the whole mindset up on Beacon Hill has to change. We have to be able to look at the budget process and say, not the what do we think we're going to get, what did we get last year? And then budget from that particular standpoint. I think that when we look for solutions, everything you mentioned, Pete, you know, there's no way we can complete that list. We have to look at it, and we have to prioritize as a society and say, okay, what do we really need? What really has to happen here? And then you make a decision, okay, well, how do we get there? Now, some people are saying that, you know, that we should tax a certain segment of our society. It's known as the Millionaire Tax. I'm against that. Why? Because I think it's a bad approach, and it's a bad approach for a number of reasons. They tried this in England. They tried this in Connecticut. And you know what happened? The people who made that money and were now being asked to pay twice the tax rate at a certain level, they said, see ya. We're out of here. And they changed where their primary residence was. And what did they take with them? They didn't just take with, you know, their bathing suits with them. They took with them, you know, small businesses. They took with them workers. And it was a bad idea. Here in Massachusetts, there's a question whether or not it's even constitutional, because you're now going to take appropriation authority away from the legislature. But that's not the answer. The answer is to sit up here and say, let's just tax everybody. I think you got to prioritize, you got to look at your budgets, you got to look at actual revenues. And, you know, we have been somewhat imaginative in coming up with new revenues, whether it's been, you know, our lottery money or casinos or, you know, various ways to distribute local aid. But to your point, Pete, no, we probably can't solve all those problems. We should prioritize them, we should see what we can do within our budget, and then, you know, make the hard decisions from there.
Thank you, and our final panelist question is brought to you by a member of the Medfield State Hospital Planning Committee, Gil Rogers, with the first response coming from Candidate Feeney. Gil, your question.
Thank you, and good evening to each of you, and thank you for participating in this discussion and debate. My question concerns the Medfield State Hospital and the reuse and redevelopment of it in the future. And as you're probably very aware, it's one of the biggest, maybe the largest decisions that's ever faced Medfield. And it'll be coming up for a very important community vote next year. My question to each of you is, what do you think the role should be for a Senate representative regarding the reuse and redevelopment of this hospital?
Thank you, Gil, and thank you for all the work that you're doing on that committee and the work that you and so many people here in Medfield have done over the years. I was in Senator Timothy's office when we were having discussions with DCAM, and the state was trying to figure out, the municipality was trying to figure out what your approach was going to be to that property. And I remember how much work went into that. We went through the same thing in Foxborough with the Foxborough State Hospital property years ago. So I think you're doing great work. you've gotten to a point now where, you know, you're ready to act, and hopefully we'll see some groundbreaking soon. I think the role of the senator, to answer your question in what you're doing here in Medfield, is to act as a partner. So to make sure that whatever you need from the legislature is being done. When you talk about the menu of options, and I think you're down to 4 options or that you consider in the state hospital property. That when you're talking about the various options and what you're trying to do to hit your master plan, you need a state senator that's going to make sure that they fight for your local ordinances up in the State House to make sure that any sort of legislation that you need filed, whether it's to change zoning, any sort of local initiative petition that you need done in the State House is actually carried through. And I'll certainly do that as a partner to Medfield, as a state senator. It's important, you know, this is a local community decision. And I think you've done a lot of work, and the community members and the people in Medfield have done a lot of work to understand all the intricacies and to hold on to open space at the same time, bringing in new development, commercial development, residential, that don't drain the local resources. As a state senator, you deserve a partner in government that'll take anything that you need back to the State House and get it done in a quick manner so that you're able to do what you need to do here in Medfield, to either start seeing revenue come back to the community that you outlaid for the purchase, or to, you know, start putting it to use and making sure that development fits within the town.
The next answer by Candidate Schwartz-Leave.
Keil, the most important thing, are you gonna keep the sledding?
Definitely.
Gotta have the sledding, It's a magnificent hill. I know that both your plans up there on Hospital Hill, I think you keep the sledding and then both of them. Just an idea. You know, when this was happening, and when this property was for sale, or the town was considering purchasing it, I can remember sitting there at night going, oh, please buy it, please buy it, please buy it. Please make sure you do this, because it is a magnificent piece of property. And I was up there this weekend, and you stand there and you look out at the Charles River, and you see the kayakers coming by, and you can see the trails starting to take shape. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And I know you have a couple of options of what you really want to do. You know, I kind of like the one that has the restaurant on the hill looking down the river myself. I don't know where you're at on that, but I think you're going to make a decision that shortly. The other issue that comes up with Hospital Hill, and I know it's going to be a mixed-use development, and it doesn't sound like we can make any mistakes at this point, because both options are gorgeous. But, you know, this whole idea of 40B developers and affordable housing, and I know that this law, which is a travesty, which allows a developer to come in and build a monstrosity if a community is not at their 10% level, is a sham, and it should be changed. But I know that because of what you're doing on Hospital Hill, you've now hit a threshold, because the Larkin properties are now going to have affordable units, and you're now at a threshold where you've been able to fend off these possible developers around town until, I guess, the spring of 2018. I applaud you for that. What could I do? Well, obviously, any legislation you'd need on Beacon Hill to make things go smoother, I would stand behind. To what Paul said in terms of, you know, zoning changes, if we need those, it doesn't sound like we do at this point. And I know there's still a question about the impact on taxes. Obviously, the hope would be that, you know, we could bring taxes down in town if we were able to generate enough up there. But right now, I think it's sort of we're looking at level. But my door would always be open on Beacon Hill to you. I think that it's one of the best things a local community has done to take its future into its own hands. And I applaud you for it. You got my support.
And finally, our response from Republican Candidate Ventura.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for all of your hard work. I have followed your work online, and I was on the phone earlier today with State Representative Sean Dooley here in Medfield, and we were chatting about this very issue, actually, and happy to have his endorsement. I think you're down to 2 plans now. You know, I tend to agree with you. You know, outdoor recreation, preservation of our outdoor space. I, as a senator, would be able to work with Secretary Matt Beaton in DCR to make sure that the parcels that are controlled by DCR fit in with your overall plan. You know, making sure we don't have mass housing on that property, I think, is something that most folks in Medfield agree with. You know, using it potentially for some housing that would help with the safe harbor issue with 40B, I think, you know, is an option. But I really like the direction we're heading. And, you know, as a state senator, you know, legislation is one thing, zoning is another thing, but fostering the relationships in the community, making sure that we have public and private relationships, quasi-relationships with entities, promoting the arts, promoting tourism. It's something I'm very familiar with doing. My boss in the House of Representatives sat on the Joint Committee of Tourism and the Arts, and over the years we were able to see firsthand how some of these committees can work with these quasi-public-private relationships. So anything we could do to attract tourism, support our art community here in Medfield, and promote local business is something I'd absolutely be a partner with you on in that regard.
All right, thank you very much for our panelists' questions. Round of applause for the awesome questions that came from our panelists. At this time, we're going to break for intermission, asking the audience to quickly write down a question that you may have thought about as our candidates have answered some of these great questions, passing it to the edge of your row so we can be collected. When we come back from intermission, we'll be answering these questions and also selecting one from our live broadcast as well in the comments section. From here, we'll break for about 10 minutes, and when we come back, we'll open up with the audience questions. So, thank you very much. Welcome back to Medfield TV's State Senate debate for the Bristol Norfolk State Senate seat. We have selected questions from the audience, and as well, we have selected a question from online. The first question coming from Amelia Tarallo, answered by Candidate Shortsleeve. Amelia, your audience question.
So my question is, how do you feel the combination of both your residential and employment history make you best suited to serve the constituents of this district? How do you feel the combination of both your residential and employment history make you best suited to serve the constituents of this district?
Oh, okay, I got you, yeah. Well, I would say that as a journalist for 35 years and 30 in the Boston television market, your job would be to really sort of fight for the consumer. I was always a consumer-based journalist, and then as I moved to the I team, it was also consumer-based, it was also taxpayer-based. And your job was to right wrongs. Your job was to fix problems. And as a I-team journalist for the last 12 years at WBC TV, whether it was state, federal, local, you were always fighting for the taxpayer dollar. Whether I was involved in a story that was looking for why millions of dollars of federal cancer research money was missing, or whether it was employees who were, installing medical equipment in people's homes that weren't properly licensed, or there was some sort of graft at town hall. What we would do is we'd take a complicated topic. We'd go in, study it, research it, and then over a period of time we'd present it. And I said to myself, when Jim Timothy made the decision to resign and step down, I said, that's a wonderful skill set to take to Beacon Hill. Throughout that time, I not only worked on IT and consumer-based stories, I worked on general stories, as what we call a general assignment report. And those stories were often school funding, Proposition 2.5 overrides, decaying roads and bridges, transportation issues, greedy developers. Don't get me started on greedy developers. I chased more than my share down the street. Remember one guy, I caught up with the camera and looked at me and he said, "Why are you after me? Why are you got a camera on my face? My lawyer sent you a statement." And I said, "You know what? I want to ask you a question about the people who say that you took $100,000 from them, and where is it?" That's what I've done. I've asked tough questions in tough situations, and I always came away with answers. So covering Beacon Hill for 35 years, meeting them all, they all know me. I know them. I thought it would be a skill set that would translate nicely to the state senate and the senator's office.
Same question to you, Candidate Ventura. Do you need the question repeated, or are you all set?
One more time.
Yeah.
How do you feel the combination of both your residential and employment history make you best suited to serve the people of these districts?
Residential, I've been a lifelong citizen, resident of Massachusetts. My roots are here in this state. I went to law school down in Virginia, which was an interesting experience. In terms of professional, this is a question I received quite a bit on the door, going door to door. I'm the youngest of the candidates, which sometimes has its positives, but sometimes you need to convince folks why you're the most qualified to be the next state senator. And so I've told folks, I've had over 10 years of experience at the local, state, and federal government level. I understand how government works, more importantly, how it doesn't work. And I understand from my time on a local finance committee and town meeting member, sitting in auditoriums much like these, where we would debate town warrants, and from that seat, you could see how state government sometimes doesn't work with local aid. I think we discussed it in the last segment. Being at the State House, in the House of Representatives, I've worked on behalf of a quarter of the district, working for the residents of this district, whether it's veteran services, home heating assistance for seniors. Down in Rehoboth, we have a lot of farmland. We had animal emergencies during one of our tropical storms, obtaining grants, working across the aisle with your Republican and Democratic colleagues to make sure you get the job done for your district. So I've had a number of experiences there as well. And I think most importantly, though, my background originally was in finance. And so I understand budgets, I understand numbers. That's where my specialty is. And I think now more than ever, we need more people up on Beacon Hill who understand how to read budgets, how to manage budgets. We discussed this earlier, a $40 billion budget that was put together in the 11th hour, actually the 12th hour. It was put together the next fiscal year. It was patchwork. We need more people up on Beacon Hill who are going to be allies of the governor to implement some of the hard reforms that we need to implement to make sure we balance our budget and that we don't put an additional tax burden on the small business owners, job creators, and homeowners of this district. So I think a combination of my financial and public service experience, in addition to me being an attorney, understanding detail, and I think that makes me best prepared to be the next senator of this district and represent us in our best needs.
And the final answer coming from Candidate Feeney.
Thank you, Brad. Really great question. And again, I think this is where you'll find some daylight between me and my opponents up here, not necessarily on substance, but certainly on style and background. Look, this business and politics, this is about people. It's about understanding people, not just budgets and numbers, not just legislation and bills, but about the people behind it. And there's probably no better way to prepare for being a state senator than being involved in your local community. Not just moving to the district so that you can run for a seat because of political opportunity. Not being here and deciding you want to run for Senate but never having gone and been active in town meetings or town government. Look, I'm from Foxborough. My wife and I moved here 13 years ago when we chose the community. We moved to the Bristol Norfolk district. I got involved right away. Not only serving as the chief of staff to Senator Timothy, getting to know this town and the communities of this district. Then I ran for selectman. Served on the Patriot Place Review Committee. I volunteered. Became a youth football coach. Volunteered in each of the neighborhoods in our community. That sort of volunteer experience, that's a lot more experience. Again, other than saying on this campaign, it's not just about our experience, it's about our life experiences. Those life experiences for me, coming up, getting out of high school and entering the workforce, for the last 20 years working in a blue-collar job, taking that miserable commute up 95, like a lot of people in this district do every day, and working hard for the boss and trying to make ends meet to build a middle-class life for my family. That's my experience. That's the experience of so many people throughout this district. In addition to being a telephone worker, I serve as the legislative director for my union, my co-workers. Over 1,000 of my coworkers rely on me to represent them on Beacon Hill. What does that mean? That means fighting jobs, middle-class American jobs, that some companies want to move. Last year, we fought a company that wanted to move our jobs to the Philippines, overseas. We have a lot of work to do in the state senate, but we can't fill the state senate with attorneys or people looking for political opportunity. We should be filling our legislature with people that are on the ground in the work, that volunteer, that do the work in our communities, that have the experience, not only in state government, which I do, on federal campaigns, which I do, in local government, which I do, but somebody who understands people, who respects people, who respects the voters. I've shown that in this campaign. I've shown that in my entire career, my entire life, and I hope people see that in me. Thank you.
Our second audience question comes from the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Pete Peterson. Will be answered first by Candidate Ventura. Chairman, your question.
So these are almost identical questions from two people in the audience. They must have been sitting next to each other. They're so similar. But they're basically asking for your views on three hot topics. First is gun control. The second is the issue of global warming and greenhouse gas emissions. And the third one is the recent issue that has come up about birth control being covered or not covered by health insurance.
So I'll step in for a second.
Global warming, birth control.
Well, the third part of that is actually our online question. So if you want to answer the first two now, you can answer the third one after.
What were the first two?
Gun control,
Yeah.
gun control, and the second one is global warming, greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, so on gun control, Massachusetts has the probably some of the strictest gun laws in the nation, and that is our culture. There are common sense reforms that have taken place on a bipartisan level nationwide. Obviously, the events a few weeks ago in Las Vegas were horrific, and one of the things that has just been proposed by Senate Minority Leader Bruce Carr on the Republican side, along with the House Minority Leader, was a ban on the bump fire stop. Now, I know that's been an issue that's been hotly debated. That is a common sense reform that I think, generally I would probably support. They're already banned in this state for sale. If you own one, then it's fine. So this would essentially ban all of them for further use. Having said that, ATF, it's very important to realize ATF under the Obama administration had indicated in their code that these devices were okay. So I think it's the position of the NRA to make sure that ATF actually looks further into this issue and to enforce the laws. So that's something I would support as well. Having said that, I don't think, during this national debate we're having, we also need to make sure we protect law-abiding citizens' rights to own firearms, possess firearms, whether they be ex-military, ex-police, ex-fire, or sportsmen or hunters, or people who just want to go to their local range. There are, thousands of gun owners who are law-abiding citizens. They're legal guns. We need to be going after the bad guys, the guns on the streets. And you look at, Chicago for an example. Guns are banned there, yet they have some of the highest gun violence in the nation. So we need to be very smart about our gun policy. Number two, what was the greenhouse gas emissions? Yeah, look, today was a rather warm day. I'm not complaining. I know the governor, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to get into the details about greenhouse gas, but I do know the governor and lieutenant governor have led the nation in reducing emissions here in Massachusetts, have provided incentives for local municipalities to reduce emissions, looking at alternative energy, and also their latest proposal to give incentives for lower income individuals to use alternative energy sources as well. So that's something that I would absolutely support and continue with the governor's good work.
Thank you, and Candidate Feeney, your answer to that question.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for the question. Number one, let's take it. Number one, gun control. I'll tell you, obviously a hot topic, and we've heard about it certainly in recent days after that tragedy. That's tough for many of us to get over. You can't see a tragedy like that and not feel that we're not doing enough. I will say that I grew up comfortable around firearms. My father actually used to take me right here to Medfield, to the sportsman club, and taught me how to safely operate a firearm. I used to do some pointing with the 22, and my dad would go out and shoot clay. Have breakfast every Sunday morning right here in Medfield, where we learned to safely operate firearms. They were in my house. They were safely locked up, and my dad was responsible gun owner for the entire time that I lived in that home. I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. We don't want to see any law-abiding citizens' right taken away. That's not my priority. It's not something I want to do. But at the same time, I think we need common sense gun control laws. I think at a federal level, Congress needs to get their act together. They need to do more so that we don't have a patchwork of laws throughout this country. You know, in some places it's legal to do things, other places it's illegal. Understanding and respecting state rights, but at the same time, we need to have some common sense. Sitting here in Massachusetts, as my opponent said, Massachusetts has some of the most stringent gun laws in the country, and I think that's good. I think hunters and sportsmen should have the right to apply their craft. I don't want to take their guns away, but I think we need to do what we can to keep dangerous weapons out of the hands of dangerous people. It's a mental health issue also. Going on to global warming, I think we need to be honest with each other that it actually exists. Both my opponents voted for Trump. The Republican Party obviously hasn't come to that conclusion yet that global warming is an actual thing, despite the fact that, I know Jacob's not a scientist, as he said, but the fact that the majority of scientists across this world say that it's real. We have a lot of work to do in Massachusetts. We do some good work. As a state senator, I'll support legislation that increases our renewable portfolio standards to make sure that we're doing more in Massachusetts, that we're actually leading the way. We need to invest in a green economy. One of the fastest growing sectors here in the Commonwealth is the green energy economy. We need to make sure that we're putting people to work, building solar farms, building wind turbines, making sure that we're not only respecting our environment, but that we're prepared for the next generation of jobs. In Foxborough, when I got elected, one of the first things I did is I set up a renewable energy advisory committee. We didn't have one in our community before. And I thought that global warming was real. I thought we needed to lead the way in Foxborough. And I think as a state senator, I'll push to make sure that we lead the way in Massachusetts to make sure that we're setting up a future for Massachusetts, and we can preserve open space, and then we can actually count on our environment to be there for us years to come.
And our final response to this question from Candidate Shortsleeve.
You know, what happened in Las Vegas, you shake your head, it's just, there really are no words. One thing that you come back to here in Massachusetts, and both these gentlemen have touched upon it, we have some of the strictest gun laws in the country here. Some ratings we are either the fifth most strict or the third most strict in the country. And police officers are out there to say more times than not, when there's a crime committed in Massachusetts, they ultimately track the gun and have it come from out of state. We clearly aren't doing a good job keeping people safe. Now, I do support the Second Amendment. I support people's rights to bear arms. But we need to do a much better job of keeping people safe. Now, the bump stock issue is one that takes a semi-automatic weapon and it turns it into a fully automatic weapon. And there is now a move to ban it. I think even the NRA is now suggesting, okay, maybe we need to look at that. Duh, we do. Here in Massachusetts, I know there's a move, even in Massachusetts, it was my understanding that there was a loophole in Massachusetts and the bump stocks are still legal. And the Democratic State Representative Linsky from Maine moved just recently, I believe, to close that loophole to make bump stocks illegal. The other thing that happened in Las Vegas was that this individual bought at least, I don't hold me quite to the numbers, but I think it was 10 rifles in a month. And that triggered nothing. if you bought 2 handguns, it would have triggered something in the database or something would have noticed. But since they were rifles, nothing happened. That strikes me as silly. If somebody's loading up on weapons in a short period of time, we should have a database that sets off some bells and somebody should pay a visit to this individual. And like an automobile driver's license, you know, they expire. They expire. I think we've probably all been there. Oh, my license expired, I didn't know it. Gun licenses should expire. And people should just have to revisit it, have a conversation, revisit with whoever issued the license. I'm not saying that would necessarily keep a crime from happening, but who knows if somebody had to revisit this individual out in Las Vegas, they would have picked up on anything. Those are just some ideas. Greenhouse gas emissions, I was disappointed today with what the Trump administration did, rolling back greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, I'll stop there, but I'll just add, I did think I want to do a shout out to Charlie Baker and his administration. They've done a very, very good job in this area. And alternative energy and solar and wind, keep it going.
Fantastic. Our third audience question will be from our Medfield State Hospital Planning Committee member, Gil Rogers, and will be answered first by Candidate Feeney. Gil, your question.
This is, I think, an excellent question that is important for the candidates, but also I think it's very important for the Medfield community and the education system. And the question has to do with jobs, and all of you have mentioned jobs. The question is, what do you think is the best way to create long-lasting jobs? And that's the key idea, the long-lasting jobs. And how can we make sure that we're setting up our systems such that jobs won't become obsolete in a short period of time?
So, Candidate Feeney, the question is to you.
All right. So, you got to know a little bit about me. You know that for the last 20 years, my mission in life has been to protect the jobs of people. You also heard me talk about the fact that I'm a telephone worker, which most of you here tonight, probably sitting at home know, has gone the way of the blacksmith over the last 20 years. But nobody has a landline. I'm sure these other candidates that have been calling orders all summer long will tell you that nobody has a landline, and with our sector, at least, has transitioned a little bit. So I feel that. That question, I think, touches me probably more deeply than the other 2 candidates up here, because I've seen us go through that. Long-lasting jobs, I think, have to be the priority of what we do here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Jobs, making sure that we're training people. I talked to a person out in the audience just a little while ago who goes to a trade school. And I don't think we're doing enough to make sure that we're investing in folks that aren't necessarily going right to college, which I certainly didn't do, but that we're investing in educational opportunities to train people to do the jobs of today. We've shifted it to a gig economy. We've seen people driving Uber and doing the Airbnb stuff to try and make ends meet, and we don't have enough jobs that are career jobs anymore. When I grew up, it was you either got onto the police or fire, or you went to the utility company. You had a career with the promise that you could retire with dividend, that you had a defined benefit pension. Those jobs are gone. It's on the way of the dinosaur. We need to do everything we can to make sure that we're setting ourselves up to train for the next phase of jobs that are coming our way. I think it's in the green economy. I think we can do more in the life sciences. I think there's areas here in Massachusetts and in the Bristol and Norfolk district where we can build the spec around cluster development, maybe even right here in Medfield, where we can offer people jobs in a trade and a technology that's on the cusp of really exploding. I think we need to do that. We need to train workers. We need to make sure we're investing in trade schools, make sure that we're investing in community colleges, shifting some of the old manufacturing style jobs onto a new economy that isn't a gig economy, working for a per diem or a daily wage, but something that people can rely on, where they can make ends meet, where they can build a middle class. Middle class is eroded in this country. We need to build a middle class in this country, and I think we do that by training people up, investing in those sectors, incentivizing those industries to come to the Bristol and Norfolk district especially, and then having a whole host of jobs from servicing the building to working in new technologies. Thank you.
Candidate Shortsleeve, you have the next answer.
Well, you know, often I'm asked what is the biggest issue in the district. And while there are a lot of very big issues, I do think that the economy and jobs remains perhaps the number one issue in this district. You know, followed quickly by, you know, healthcare, school funding, reforms to the 40B law. They're all right up there. If you're going to protect jobs, right, it's only logical that what you have to do is you have to, at some level, protect businesses. And I think there's a lot of talk about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour right away. Now, I just met with the Associated Industries of Massachusetts Friday afternoon at the downtown offices on Beacon Street to talk about what business wants. And what business wants is they would rather see, and I happen to agree with this, a gradual increase to the minimum wage so that you don't croak small businesses right away, but move it in the right direction, set a timeline and get there, set a goal and get there. And I talked to them about this other idea. I said, okay, well, you know, businesses are saying, oh, we can't raise the minimum wage. I said, yeah, you can. I said, couldn't we create incentives for small businesses, medium businesses, people who move quickly along, raising the minimum wage? Can't we build in some sort of credit for them if they'll get there quicker? Doesn't that work for everybody? That was a conversation we had on Friday afternoon. I think the government has to be active in attracting businesses, reaching out, finding businesses like GE to come here. Those are jobs that will last for a long time. The other issue about business in this district is retail. Retail is dying. It's the Amazon effect. Amazon is taking the legs out from so many businesses. You see so many empty storefronts. And one of the things the business community wants at this point is they want to roll back the sales tax from 6.25% to 5%. I support that. I think that's a good idea. And people say, well, whoa, how are you going to make up that money? How are you going to make up the difference between 5% and 6.25%? I said, again, I look at it like a minimum wage. I said, let's go crash. It's knock off a quarter of a point here over 5 years. Let's bring it down. By bringing down the sales tax, you could actually encourage more growth. You could encourage more sales. You could hopefully reverse what's going on with the retail industry at this point, which is just getting steamrolled by the Amazons. We have to do things to your point, to make sure that we're protecting jobs and protecting jobs for the long term.
And the last response from Candidate Ventura.
I was proud to announce yesterday that I was recently just endorsed by the NFIB, which is the National Federation of Independent Businesses. They represent thousands of small businesses in Massachusetts and over 1 million employees of small businesses. They represent Main Street, and they endorsed me for my positions when it comes to small businesses. Taxes, regulations. Part of my campaign, in addition to going door to door, many of your doors, at households, has been to go and visit as many small businesses as I can throughout the district. I've been to tool and stamping companies, trade schools, and both of these gentlemen up here are absolutely correct with some of their points. I'm for lowering the income tax like the people voted for, back down to 5%, the sales tax and the meals tax down to 5%. I think we need to take a hard look at the inventory tax and the room occupancy tax to make sure that we are competitive with our neighboring states and, quite frankly, states across this nation to attract big business and to attract small businesses. Entrepreneurs put it all on the line, and time and time again, they feel the squeeze from state government trying to balance their books on small businesses. The number of regulations are just unbelievable. They're staggering across the industry. Regulations that impact our border. This is a border district with Rhode Island. The regulations that impact border businesses, the uncompetitive advantage that Rhode Island businesses have to Massachusetts, for example. So we need to take a hard look at reforming, the thousands and thousands of regulatory schemes that are in place now. But the NFIB was a huge endorsement. I'm very proud of that. Unemployment, to answer the question, unemployment is, last I checked, it was still around the national average of about 4.9%. We could do a better job. I know the governor has invested highly in education. And this is one area where my Democrat colleague and I agree. The trades. I was down in Seekonk, which is the southernmost point of this district, at MTTI, which is a trade school, and we were talking about how to fulfill the deficit. There is a need right now for plumbers and electricians and folks in tech and medicine. These are jobs that don't necessarily require a 4-year bachelor's degree. And we need to do a better job at promoting our vocational schools, our agricultural schools, which are some of the best in the state, and foster relationships with businesses in the business community for apprenticeships and hiring these folks hopefully once they earn their degree.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the audience for submitting all your fantastic questions. Your participation was much appreciated. Our final question comes from our online source from Ben Stanton, who is watching at home. Ben wants to ask, what do you think of the Trump administration's efforts to block contraceptive access to women? The candidate who will answer that question first is Candidate Shortsleeve.
I disagree with it. I think that, for me, much of this comes down to economic fairness. It's not necessarily the contraceptive issue, it's the economic fairness issue. It's that these people can afford it, these people can afford it, well, these people can't, so tough luck. So for me, I think that so many times when I'm asked an issue as it relates to this particular topic or abortion, I say that, you know, we have to watch out for everybody. And if there are certain members of our population or society that need a particular helping hand, then we should give it. But yeah, I disagree with that. You know, I think that that's it's an issue that really is upsetting to a lot of people. It's an issue that is one that transcends many conversations, and I know it's a divisive point. I've heard this topic, you know, on doorsteps across the district, and I've had people say, you know, Joe, we think this about that, but that's where I come down. I make my decision, and I just say, well, it's got to be fair for everybody. So therefore, you know, I disagree.
The next answer comes from Candidate Ventura.
Well, I think this is part of the problem when we have a one-size-fits-all approach to healthcare nationally. Massachusetts led the way in healthcare back in 2002. We still tend to lead the way in certain areas, always need for improvement. With regards to this issue, we need a plan that works for Massachusetts. There's a bill in the legislature now, the Access Bill, that Governor Baker said he would sign and that I would support as a senator, which would reverse the administration's action on birth control, and it would require employers to provide contraception coverage for all employee health plans, and it would go even farther than the Affordable Care Act, where it would actually mandate emergency contraception at pharmacies. And I think it also allows an individual woman to pick up a year's worth of birth control at one time. So I support that piece of legislation. If it goes anywhere in the legislature, it in effect would reverse the administration's recent move.
And the final answer to this question, Candidate Feeney.
Thank you, Brett. The fact that my two opponents up here, everybody in this room, is absolutely outraged by the decision of the White House is beyond me. This is about fundamental fairness, not just about contraception, it's not just about economic fairness, it's fundamental fairness. Look, we deserve a senator that'll stand up for women, that'll work to sign the access bill, of course, Jacob, but that also stands up against decisions like we just saw come out of the White House. We deserve a senator that will stand up against discrimination in all its forms. We absolutely deserve a state senator that'll support the right of women to make their own healthcare choices, not their bosses. As a state senator, I'll support the access bill. No question about that. I've already said that in many questionnaires and on the stump. But I've dealt with bullies my whole life. What we have now is a bully in the White House that these two voted for, that these two support, who's taken on women. That's unacceptable. In Massachusetts, we need to do a better job in using the bully pulpit in the state senate and across the legislature to stand up to decisions like that. I was so proud to be endorsed, the only candidate to be endorsed by the Planned Parenthood Action Fund in this race. I was so proud to stand with our Attorney General, Mara Healey, yesterday in my headquarters, just days after she filed suit against the Trump administration in the White House. We need to do more. It's not just coming up again and talking about issues and nuance. It's about actually standing up for people, standing up for women. So I'll do as a state senator. I think that's what we deserve in this district.
All right, thank you very much for everyone who asked a question, including Ben Stanton from online. Now it's time for our closing statements, and the first closing statement comes from Candidate Ventura. Candidate Ventura?
Thank you all for attending here, and thank you for the folks viewing on Facebook or YouTube. Thank you to our great panel and the people here at Medfield at the high school. You have a decision to make next Tuesday, October 17th, and I think the decision is pretty clear. We didn't have a chance in depth to talk about health care, sanctuary cities. My Democratic opponent, okay, his health care plan, single-payer health care, will cost the Commonwealth $35 billion, and he has no way to pay for it. It's easy to say, but he has no way to pay for it. It would cost an additional $9,000 per family. So he talks about helping the middle class. It's just absolutely outrageous that he continues to push this plan, okay? In terms of sanctuary cities, he supports it. You can look at the quote online. I tend to favor giving our local law enforcement the tools they need to make sure our cities are safe. I've worked with Governor Baker, Bristol County Sheriff Tom Hodgson on this, and I think in dealing with that issue, we need to deal with people with compassion, but we also need to respect our laws. We are a nation of laws. And when it comes to taxes, I'm the only candidate up here, I think, that's for lowering taxes, making sure state government lives within its means, just like every one of us do and every small business does, and making sure we're competitive so we can grow our employment base here for the future. And with education, again, Medfield is one of the best municipalities in the state. You deserve a lot of credit, but we do need to change the funding formula, Chapter 70. And with regards to tourism and the arts, it's something that I have had some background in doing up in the legislature, and I think this hospital committee would be suited perfect for my experience in making sure we give Medfield not only increased local aid through Chapter 70 and 90, but also the grants and attracts artists and small businesses to that property. So I want to close by saying I'm the only fiscal conservative up here. I'm proud of that. And I've been endorsed by the NFIB, represents Main Street. I've been endorsed by Governor Charlie Baker, Bristol County Sheriff Tom Hodgson, as well as a number of my Republican colleagues up in the legislature. And we need some balance in Beacon Hill. And I plan on bringing that balance. I plan on advocating for our communities and making sure that we implement a lot of the great reforms that Governor Baker and Karen Keil, Lieutenant Governor, have implemented. And I look forward to being a part of that process. I ask you for your votes on Tuesday, October 17th. Thank you so much.
And Candidate Feeney, your closing statement.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you to Medfield TV, to our panelists, to the awesome audience tonight, the folks watching at home on YouTube Live. It's been an incredible pleasure to campaign throughout the Bristol Norfolk District, especially here in Medfield. This is an incredible opportunity to go out and to talk to people, to connect with folks, to find out what the issues are that are facing working families throughout this district, to have a conversation. We've done that. I'm proud to say that my campaign has campaigned positively. That not only myself, but every single person on my team has kept this campaign about values and ideals, the ones that I talked about tonight. shy away from who I am, who I stand up for, who I've fought for my entire career. And I certainly won't do that because I'm running for state senate. We've kept this campaign about issues and values because that's what the people of this district deserve. We've heard the talk about partisan rhetoric, and then my two opponents engage in it. I was just given a flyer that my opponent, Jacob Ventura, put out today, one of many. I don't know if this one's funded by his campaign or the national Republican group that's been funding the other millions that are hitting this district, but they're meant to scare people. It's about fear and divisiveness that comes from my opponents. It's about splitting people apart, putting them into groups. It's about bullying. That's not what we do. We're better than that. We can disagree without being disagreeable. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we need to come to a consensus that we're all fighting for the better good. And I don't think my two opponents are bad people. I think, honestly, I've met them throughout this campaign. They're good people at their core. But they get caught up in politics as usual. When you work for a political consulting firm, as Joe has, or when you move into the district just to run for a seat, as Jacob has, you don't have respect for the people of the district. I do. I'm from here. I've worked here. I've volunteered here. I've served here. As a selectman, as a chief of staff, as a volunteer. My wife owns a small business in our home. That means something. That means something in our next state senate. Experience matters. Our life experiences matter. And the way in which we campaign and respect the will of the voters and respect the process matters. I've been blessed to have this opportunity. I've also been blessed to have the support of so many people along the way. Voters throughout this district, the Sierra Club, the Environmental League of Massachusetts, Planned Parenthood, as I mentioned, the Massachusetts Coalition of Police, the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Nurses Association. These groups endorse me because I agree with them on their values. Their values are sticking up for people, of serving our communities, of serving the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have a clear choice on Tuesday, October 17th. I urge you to get out and vote. They're saying that the turnout's going to be extremely low. We need every single vote out there. Join me in rejecting politics as usual, which we saw on display tonight. I ask for your vote on Tuesday, October 17th, and I thank you so much for this incredible opportunity. Thank you.
And Candidate Shortsleeve, your closing statement.
And thank you for allowing me to stand up for my closing. First of all, thank you to the panel. Pete, Amelia, Gil, Brett, wonderful job. Really wonderful job. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. And I met Brett over the summer at Medfield TV, and they have a very nice operation over there. This Tuesday, October 17th, you have a choice. And what you have here tonight is you have the far left and you have the far right. And what you have in the middle is your independent choice. You have a moderate, common sense, hardworking individual who's ready to go to work on day one for this district. I was looking at what's coming in the mail this week, and it was primarily coming from the Jacob Ventura campaign. I'm sure you're probably already getting it in your mailboxes. And it costs thousands and thousands of dollars. And basically all he's doing is ripping Paul Feeney. Just ripping him. And I don't know what the Feeney campaign is going to do in response. I guess it doesn't matter. But that's what's going on. That's who he is, and that's what's wrong with the country. This harsh, partisan rhetoric. And I say to you, have you had enough? Have you had enough of that? Is it time for somebody to go to work on Beacon Hill that can have a conversation with both sides, whether it's Charlie Baker or Joe Kennedy? I can talk to the both of them. You know, Ventura says that his job is to, he sees, you know, he's going to help implement Charlie Baker's agenda. Okay, I like Charlie Baker. I think Charlie Baker's doing a good job. That's not my job. I'd probably support Charlie Baker more times than not. But I'm there to work on the district's agenda. There are going to be times I disagree with Charlie Baker, and I'm going to tell him. You're not gonna get that from Jacob Ventura. We need to go work on the 40B law. We need to work on Chapter 70 funding. We need to work on minimum wage. We need to make sure that our healthcare costs, maybe perhaps we can go across state lines to bring down the costs. We need to bring the sales tax down. These are a lot of issues that are near and dear to me. You know, I'm not going to Beacon Hill to make friends with everybody up there. They already know me, and I know them. I'm going to represent the people. I'm going to work for the people in the district. I don't have a party telling me what to do. Now, when we win on Tuesday, we'll be sending a message. And the message is, it's time that politicians start working for the people.
You're getting to stop, Joe.
Not the party. Let's get started. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll let Joe take his seat. But that's it for our debate tonight. Again, quickly, I'd like to thank a lot of people here that helped this event go on. One thing that everyone here and online didn't see was we actually interrupted a Medfield High School Theater Society rehearsal that was going on in order to set up for this debate. We stayed out of their way, we let them do it, but we did have to come in and set up our cameras and stuff, and that's a big problem for them. So I want to give them a quick plug. They have their Snow Queen play that they're putting on. It's on October 27th and 28th. I think that's fair. They did an absolutely wonderful job. It looked really entertaining. You guys should definitely check that out. And I invite you guys. You guys should check that out. Absolutely, right? But that's it for our debate. The Medfield School Administration did a fantastic and amazing job. I'm being handed something on for Tuesday. Okay, that's the Medfield Welcomes Home, a President's-Owned United States Marine Band is Tuesday, October 17th from 8 to 9:15 a.m., and that's at the Medfield High School Lowell Mason Auditorium. So that's right here. So that's fantastic. So we have a, right after you vote, you can go and see the United States Marine Band. That's fantastic. So the Medfield School Administration did an amazing job helping us put this together. Volunteers all in the front, you lovely ladies deserve a round of applause. They did an amazing job, absolutely. Our panelists tonight, Hometown Weekly journalist Amelia Tarallo, you did a fantastic job. Thank you, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Osler Pete Peterson, and our Medfield State Hospital Planning Committee member, Gil Rogers. Thank you guys so much for all that you did. I'm blessed to have an absolutely amazing staff. I think I have the best staff around. I couldn't have been happier coming in. I had my audio specialist from the Medfield High School, that's Matt Frazier. He did an amazing job today. We really got blessed having him come in. Rachel Ferrulo was on the camera one up top. We have Eric Giselle covering the candidates, and Homily Bruno is covering myself and the panelists. Fantastic job, and our director in the back is Sam Merlin. So please give a round of applause for Medfield TV. Our audience tonight is in front of me, present and online. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And of course, this would be nothing without our wonderful candidates. You guys have run an amazing campaign. It's come down to the home stretch. I know I've really enjoyed watching these guys campaign. It's been fantastic. Independent candidate Joe Shortsleeve, our Democratic candidate Paul Feeney, and our Republican candidate Jacob Ventura. Thank you guys so much for all you've done. I'm your moderator tonight. I'm the general manager of Medfield TV. I'm Brett Poirier. Again, I'm blessed to have an amazing staff. I thought that this was an amazing event that we got to put on. You guys really added to it by being a part of it. Thank you for enjoying tonight's festivities. Drive safe. Make sure you vote on Tuesday. None of this is worth anything if you don't vote on Tuesday, October 17th in this election for these amazing candidates. Thank you all and have a great night.